Hey guys, it's Monday, January 27th, 2025. And we finally have some weather to talk about again. We've got multiple storms on the way and we've got a lot to cover. First, let's start off by talking about the 500 millibar winds. You guys know I love looking at this anytime we're talking about something more than 2 or 3 days out. The weather really starts up top, okay? You've got to open the hood. Check things out from above before you can fully understand what's happening at the surface. Because surface level weather is the hardest part to predict. But up at 500 millibars, that's actually pretty straightforward. And we have a solid idea of what the winds are doing several thousand feet above our heads as we head into next week. There are two big features I would point out. First, we got this big upper level closed off low hanging around in the south and west. Then up north, we've got a screaming jet stream. And both of these are going to have a major impact on our weather. But before we get into the details, hit the subscribe button, like this video, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for your support. Now, let's push this forward into Tuesday and Wednesday. You can already start to see some organization happening here. Even today, we've got a southwest and northeast flow bringing moisture into the southwestern U.S. And for areas that have been hit hard by wildfires recently, this is actually good news. It's going to bring in some much needed Pacific moisture and drop it over places like Los Angeles, San Diego, and southwestern Arizona. But at the same time, we've got to watch out for flash flooding, especially in burn scar areas where debris flows can become a problem. So if you're in those areas, be mindful of that today and tomorrow. But watch what happens as we get into Wednesday and Thursday. The setup gets even more interesting. We're going to see a really solid return flow of moisture from the Gulf of Mexico moving right over the south central plains, especially Texas. And that's going to collide with a pocket of cold air trap inside this closed off low pressure system. That's a recipe for thunderstorms and heavy rain across the south central US. Meanwhile, that big feature, the polar jet is going to push some extremely cold air into the northeast, likely making this the coldest air of the season for you guys up there. Yeah, now, unlike past cold snaps that have hit a wider portion of the country, this one looks like it's really targeting the Northeast. So for example, Florida, you guys might actually dodge this one, but New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, you're about to get hit with some real winter air, likely by Wednesday into Thursday. At the same time, while the Northeast is freezing, the South Central US is actually going to warm up significantly. Texas, Oklahoma, you guys are looking at temperatures 20 degrees above average in some areas. And that warm air is going to help fuel storms as we head into Thursday. Meanwhile, up in the Northeast, you've got the opposite. Temperatures dropping 20 to 30 degrees below average. So there's going to be a massive temperature contrast across the country, and that's setting up the potential for some big weather events. Now, let's talk about the severe weather setup. The official day 4 species outlook is already showing a slight risk for severe thunderstorms in and around San Angelo, Texas on Wednesday. I expect this outlook to stay at least at a slight risk, maybe even expanding a bit tomorrow. San Antonio and other parts of central Texas might get included as well. So if you're in these areas, start preparing now. This is going to begin with a chance of isolated hail and damaging winds, maybe even a few tornadoes. Then as we go into Thursday, the severe threat shifts east, likely transitioning into more of a mesoscale convective system, straight line damaging wind event. Of course, we always have to watch for tornadoes embedded in that line, as well as the possibility of prefrontal supercells. But right now, the main area of concern stretches from San Angelo down through San Antonio and up toward Dallas on Thursday, January 30th. So again, if you're in these areas, stay weather aware. But severe weather isn't the only concern. We also have to watch out for heavy rain and potential flash flooding. Early in the week, moisture is going to surge northward into Louisiana and Mississippi, Alabama, and even up into the Ohio and Tennessee valleys. And that could bring some snowfall into my neck of the woods by Tuesday. There's also a big clipper system moving through Canada, bringing snow to the Great Lakes region. So while the Northeast gets that cold blast, there's going to be some snow coming with it as well. By midweek, that closed off low becomes the main feature we're tracking. Watch what happens on Wednesday. A massive area of moisture develops, leading to heavy rainfall across the south central US and in places that don't get thunderstorms. We're looking at significant rain rates, especially in the Arklatex region, due to that strong Gulf moisture feed. Meanwhile, On the backside of this system, we're expecting a decent snowstorm for Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico. And as the system strengthens on Thursday, we could be looking at a major winter storm forming over southern Colorado and northern New Mexico. Now, this storm's impacts could extend beyond just Texas and Oklahoma. By late week, we might see severe weather threats spreading north into the Red River Valley and Oklahoma City, with heavy rain stretching into the Mississippi River Valley. Flash flooding is going to be a big concern, especially in southeastern Oklahoma, southwestern Arkansas, northeastern Texas, and northwestern Louisiana. And on the northern side of the system, we'll have to watch for snow. Right now, it doesn't look like one of those massive snowstorms that blankets the entire Midwest, but that could change. The main thing we do know for sure. There's going to be a lot of moisture, and flooding could become a big issue. The Weather Prediction Center already has a day 5 excessive rainfall outlook highlighting the same areas at risk for flash flooding, and for them to issue a slight risk at day 5 this large, especially in January, is pretty uncommon. So I wouldn't be surprised if this gets upgraded to a moderate risk as we get closer. Looking ahead, the 6-10 day temperature outlook from the Climate Prediction Center shows a major pattern shift. By the end of January and into early February, we're going to see above average temperatures stretching from Florida all the way up into Wisconsin and Michigan. Meanwhile, the western U.S. is going to trend colder. This sets up a battle zone in the central part of the country, likely leading to more storm systems. So far this winter, we've seen a lot of different storm systems, some of them behaving just as we would expect, while others have been way out of the ordinary. One of the most recent surprises was that Gulf Coast winter storm just a few days ago, which is something we don't see very often. But as we move into February, that type of setup is going to become much less likely. Gulf Coast winter storms and even some of the Southern Plains storms are going to take a backseat. And the reason for that is pretty clear. La Nina is finally waking up. La Nina technically started back in December, but hasn't really had much of an influence on our weather up until now. In fact, this whole winter so far has felt like we've been stuck in some kind of weird middle ground between El Nino and La Nina, where neither one was really taking control. But I think that's about to change in a big way. Over the next few weeks, La Nina is going to become a much bigger factor, and that's going to shift everything: the storm tracks, the cold air outbreaks, and even the areas that see the most snow. To put this into perspective, let's talk about what a typical Nina pattern looks like. Last winter, we saw a strong La Nina setup, which meant there was a lot more rainfall along the southern tier of the U.S. thanks to a strong Pacific jet stream. At the same time, much of the southeast and parts of the Ohio Valley had drier than normal conditions, and the northern plains and the Pacific Northwest ended up much warmer than average. That's been the typical LA Nina signature in past years. But what's coming up in February looks a little different based on what we're seeing in the models right now. I think we're going to see a setup where much of the Gulf Coast and Southeast stay drier than normal, continuing the trend we've already been seeing in parts of the Southwest. Meanwhile, wetter than normal conditions are going to take over in the Ohio Valley, which means more opportunities for rain and snow in that region. And then, of course, the cold air is going to start setting up across the Midwest, eventually working its way into the Northeast. I think February is going to be a much colder month, especially across the northern plains and the Midwest, where we could see some really brutal Arctic air moving in during the early to middle part of the month. Now, if we take a look at what's been happening recently, it's clear that we've been dealing with a really interesting jet stream pattern. The jet stream has been diving way down from Canada, reaching all the way to the Gulf Coast, and that's what allowed that Gulf Coast winter storm to happen in the first place. We also had another winter storm right before that, stretching all the way from Texas to the East Coast, where that pattern is about to change in a big way. Instead of seeing the jet stream dip so far south, we're going to see it shift much farther west. That means we're going to start seeing a lot more activity in the central U.S., especially across the Great Plains and the Ohio Valley. Snowstorms are going to become much more frequent in the central and northern plains, as well as the Midwest and Ohio Valley. On top of that, we're also going to see severe weather ramping up with damaging winds, hail, and even tornadoes becoming more of a concern in areas like Dixie Alley and the southern plains. Now, one of the biggest things to watch over the next few weeks is how these storms develop. With the jet stream shifting west, we're going to see more storms originating over the Pacific Ocean, moving across the Rockies, and then intensifying as they head into the Midwest and Great Plains. That's going to mean more frequent snow in those areas, while the Southeast will see more rain instead of winter weather. In the short term, we already have a few winter storms on the way this week. We're expecting a system to move through Canada, bringing snow to the Great Lakes and Northeast on Tuesday. Some areas, especially in the higher elevations of New England, could see moderate to heavy snowfall. Then on Wednesday, another quick moving system will bring more snow to the Northeast, but it won't be a major storm, just enough to bring a few inches in some spots. By Thursday, the first of many storms in this new pattern will start developing. We're looking at a system that will bring showers, possibly some thunderstorms, and even a chance for severe weather in the southern plains. At the same time, snowfall is expected in the Rockies. As this storm moves east into Friday and Saturday, it's going to bring more widespread rain to the southeast and possibly some wintry weather from the Midwest to New England. Now that the pattern looks very active, with more storms following a similar track, we'll keep seeing these systems moving in from the Pacific, crossing the Rockies, and bringing snow to the northern plains and Midwest while dropping rain across the south. This is going to be a big shift from what we've seen so far this winter, and it's going to keep things interesting through at least the first couple of weeks of February. As for temperatures, February is looking milder for most of the country, but that doesn't mean we won't see some Arctic blasts. In fact, we could get 1 or 2 strong shots of cold air in the second week of February, especially in the northern plains and Northeast. But the overall, compared to January, February is shaping up to be warmer for much of the US, particularly in the South. The Climate Prediction Center is on board with this idea, showing above average temperatures likely for the East Coast, Gulf Coast, and Four Corners region, while colder than average conditions will be more frequent in the northern plains and Pacific Northwest. Snow and rain are expected to be above normal in the Midwest, Northeast, and Ohio Valley, while below average precipitation is expected in the Gulf Coast, Southeast, and Four Corners states. And for those of you who are hoping for another Gulf Coast winter storm, honestly, I don't see that happening anytime soon. I don't want to say it's impossible because, the weather loves to surprise us, but based on what we're seeing right now, I don't think we'll be getting another one anytime soon, unless aliens show up and change the forecast. So overall, February is going to be very different from what we've seen so far this winter. The storm track is shifting, cold air is setting up in new places, and severe weather is starting to become a bigger factor. I'll keep you posted on any changes. So if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon so you don't miss the latest updates. Thanks for watching. Hit that like button, and I'll see you in the next forecast.